I'm joined now by my colleague, Naomi Klein. She has investigated and reported on climate change and its effects around the world. And she's also exposed some of the greatest corporate and human vultures who have contributed to this war against the planet and the war against our health. Naomi's latest book is This Changes Everything: Capitalism Versus the Climate. Naomi is now a senior correspondent for The Intercept. Naomi, welcome back to Intercepted.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's great to be with you.
Okay, we've got a lot to cover on the environment, on deregulation, on the insanity that seems to be taking place 24/7 at the White House. But I want to begin with the Keystone XL pipeline.
Today, I'm pleased to announce the official approval of the presidential permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. It's going to be an incredible pipeline, greatest technology known to man or woman.
Trump is issuing construction permits and moving forward with this incredibly controversial pipeline that has sparked massive indigenous-led protests in this country. Give us an overview of what the stakes are here and what's happening.
So, this isn't a surprise. It was one of his campaign pledges. He actually pushed it ahead his first day on the job. Now it's moving further along. They were waiting for State Department approval, which they now have, and they have without any kind of environmental assessment. They said they considered all of the factors and then listed them, and not one of those factors was climate change, which is really significant because when Obama finally said no to Keystone after years of protests, he said that one of the factors was that it would contribute to climate change. And that's because of what is in the pipe. The pipe starts in the Alberta tar sands and it ends at Gulf Coast refineries. That southern leg is already constructed, but it's the northern leg coming from Canada, going through South Dakota, Nebraska. That's what has yet to be constructed. Now, the reason why this is relevant in terms of climate change is twofold. One, because the oil in Alberta is a particularly heavy, carbon-intensive kind of oil. It has the consistency of tar. So what you have to do is mine it. And so there are many accidents associated with it. It's a particularly dangerous form of fuel on a bunch of different levels, but also this process of mining takes more energy than a conventional barrel of oil. On average, it takes 3 times more fossil fuels to extract 1 barrel of tar sands oil than a conventional barrel of North American crude. So from a climate perspective, it's a disaster. This has been such a defining feature of the Trump administration, this determination to unleash a fossil fuel frenzy. It is a major, major, major priority of Donald Trump. And it is not the only way to create jobs. You can create many more jobs, exponentially more jobs, if you invest in renewables, if you invest in energy efficiency, if you invest in public transit, than if you build a pipeline, right? Keystone is going to create 35 permanent jobs at the end of the day. But it is a very lazy way to create jobs, right? And it should not be lost on people that the company that will gain the most if these various pipelines are constructed, is ExxonMobil, the company that Rex Tillerson, now Secretary of State, was head of until a couple of months ago.
Oil sands projects like Kearl and the Keystone Pipeline will provide secure and reliable energy to the United States. Over the coming years, projects like these could create more than 500,000 jobs in the U.S. alone. From the Canadian border,
Exxon has around 1/3 of its fossil fuel reserves tied up in the Alberta tar sands. Now, if they can't get those reserves out, if they can't dig it up because they don't have the pipeline capacity, which is the current situation, then those become stranded assets. And of course, they also become stranded assets if there's serious climate regulation. And of course, the Trump administration is waging war on climate action on every front, most notably this week's attack on Obama's Clean Power Plan, which is the centerpiece of the Obama administration's plan to reduce emissions.
What are the long-term stakes of actions like constructing the Keystone Pipeline or extracting the Alberta tar sands? Like, why does this matter to our planet? In plain terms, what is this going to do?
So right now, we have warmed the planet by 1 degree Celsius. And we are already seeing huge impacts from that, from massive wildfires. And this is happening right now under the Trump administration, though you wouldn't know it from Donald Trump's tweets. But The prairies have seen huge wildfires that have killed tens of thousands of cattle. Ranchers there are calling this their Katrina because they're being completely ignored.
The wildfires have already swallowed dozens of structures and millions of acres as they continue to grow, marching across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Colorado, where strong winds and dry conditions have created a tinderbox.
If we do not radically move very, very quickly to get to 100% renewable energy by mid-century, which is very soon, then we will have lost our chance to prevent warming at double what we've already done. So we've increased temperature by 1 degree Celsius. We're already seeing the bleaching and die-off of natural wonders of the world like the Great Barrier Reef. We're already seeing a huge increase in drought and forest fires. We're already seeing sea level rise and superstorms like Superstorm Sandy. We will increase temperatures more than that. That's already locked in. But if we do everything we can and mobilize wartime level efforts, we could move quickly enough to prevent warming of more than 2 degrees, or if we are extremely lucky, 1.5 degrees Celsius. But if we do what we're doing, which is known as business as usual, i.e. pretend it's not happening and just keep digging up the stuff, what that leads to is 4 to 6 degrees of warming. Now that comes from not 350.org or Greenpeace, that comes from the World Bank, that comes from PricewaterhouseCoopers. 4 degrees Celsius of warming is incompatible with anything you could describe as organized, civilized life. Even with 2 degrees warming, Jeremy, we may well be losing coastal cities.
So how would that happen if the base temperature of the world increases by 2 degrees or 4 degrees, as you're saying could potentially happen? Does it mean then we see more tsunamis, we see more earthquakes, floods, etc.? Like what would this look like if we end up at 4 degrees or 6 degrees increase in temperature?
Even thinking about 2 degrees, we will see significant sea level rise that could potentially threaten coastal cities like New York, like Mumbai, major population centers at 2 degrees. The problem is we've waited so long that is the only kind of target that seems feasible if we do everything possible. The centerpiece of the U.S.'s climate action plan is exactly what is being dismantled right now by the EPA under Scott Pruitt, which is the Clean Power Plan. And so, yes, it means warmer ocean temperatures, which is what superpowers storms like Katrina and Sandy. You can never say, well, this one storm was caused by climate change. The storm would have happened anyway. But what turns it into a superstorm, and we're seeing these sort of once-in-a-century storms happening with greater and greater frequency, is that added accelerant of temperatures being that much warmer, and also the baseline sea level being that much higher, so that the storms are reaching into areas where they had never reached before. The high water mark is changing. And we are already going to be dealing with a rocky future, which is why the Trump administration's war on the public sector is so dangerous. I mean, it's so dangerous and so profoundly cruel on so many levels. But from a climate perspective, the very fact of collecting data that this is even happening is being attacked at NASA. Satellite programs that tell us that Arctic ice is melting, leading to sea level rise. So they want us to be blind, and they want to do nothing about it. And I think part of what we're going to see under Trump is a rise of a very privatized disaster response. You and I reported together from New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina and saw that sort of corporate state descend on the city, the Blackwater private security and Bechtel and Fluor and Halliburton and the whole Baghdad gang coming into profit from it. And this is what, frankly, worries me most, because I think, I think we're paying too much attention to these minor schisms within the Bush administration of, whether or not...
You said Bush, it's Trump, but okay, point taken.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Jeremy. This is what's happening to me.
Fair enough, fair enough.
I realized that the incredible similarities between Donald Trump and Paul Bremer, locked up in the green zone issuing executive orders.
he hunkered down in the White House this weekend and made a big deal about how he was staying in town to actually work instead of going golfing, not golfing at Mar-a-Lago. I wanted
the sacrifice, it's incredible.
And one other, you were talking about the privatized disaster response. I mean, even on a kind of micro level in cities around the country, we already see privatized firefighting forces, where if there are wildfires that break out, including because of climate change, the ultra wealthy have contracts with privatized firefighters that will go and put out the fires for them. If you're poor and the budget has been gutted and there is no fire department, well, your land's just going to blow. The fire's going to blow through it and you're finished.
In California, we heard a few years back that AIG had pioneered what they were calling a concierge service for their higher end customers, where if a fire was coming to your area, they would rush in with these private firefighters and spray your home in fire retardant.
Some of the most beautiful places to live are prone to natural disasters. That's why AIG created the Wildfire Protection Unit. This complimentary service helps our customers prepare their homes to withstand wildfire season.
Meanwhile, 4,000 of California state firefighters are prison inmates being paid between $1 and $2 an hour to fight fires. So this, disaster apartheid is here, and that's the phrase I used when I wrote The Shock Doctrine, but it's accelerating quickly. And this is why I think we can really overstate the importance of whether or not Rex Tillerson and Ivanka believe climate change is happening versus Trump, who says it's a hoax, and Pruitt, who denies the science. What they all share in common is that they think they're going to be fine. And that is what is so scary about this. The New Yorker had a really good piece a month or so ago on high-end survivalism, right? The people in Silicon Valley and Wall Street building gilded bunkers, buying land, elevated land in New Zealand, and really, luxury prepping for the disasters to come that are the intersection between social collapse and climate change. So what we're seeing is the loss of an incentive to solve these problems. And that's what's really worrying. What matters is not what an individual person in the Trump administration says or doesn't say about the science of climate change. The problem is they think they're going to be okay.
Right. I mean, it's sort of like their version of the Purge.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual Purge sanctioned by the U.S. government.
Where, except like climate is the killing fields and lack of appropriate disaster response, lack of evacuation from the evacuation plans from the public sector, the kinds of abandoning of cities like you saw in New Orleans. I mean, in a way, this is the most twisted version of their idea of social Darwinism mixed in with a Hollywood horror-esque scenario like The Purge. It's really like kind of The Purge for the climate. I don't know if you watched that movie series.
Coming back to Rex Tillerson, right, who his company...
Before you go to Rex Tillerson, can I just ask you, Naomi Klein, have you seen any of the Purge movies?
I'm sort of feeling badly that I have not seen them, but I've seen many dystopian cli-fi films, and I feel like part of the problem
But do you know what the Purge, what the basis of the Purge is? Can I just tell you?
What is the basis?
Okay, so the Purge is set in our world, but slightly in the future, and the policy in the United States that the government has set is that for 24 hours once a year, murder is legal, and anyone can go out and murder or maim or attack anyone they want, and it's perfectly lawful, and you have exactly 24 hours to do it. And it's a trilogy of movies. And in the first film, you see that wealthier families have very sophisticated security systems to protect them from the purge, and that you have a lot of poor people or people without resources being subjected to either random murder or neighbors or gangsters or what have you settling scores. And also the ultra wealthy pay to go to clubs where they can actually kill poor people that have been abducted by a private company that then delivers them to the gathering for the rich people to murder in a kind of burlesque show.
Don't force us to hurt you. We don't want to kill our own. Please just let us purge. Toodaloo, Sanders.
Are they good?
No. No, but the fact that I'm talking about them means that they're relevant because in a
Yeah.
way it's sort of prescient. I mean, I really do feel like if they're not intending to implement the purge here, this is a very brilliant, unintentional plagiarism of those films that Trump and his team are engaged in.
A feeling that I think so many people had during the aftermath of Katrina, which was like, this is too sci-fi. It's too sci-fi that Blackwater is here. It's too sci-fi that this is being seen as a site for profit. Let's not forget that the other thing that was happening in New Orleans is that white vigilantes were hunting Black people in the streets. Let's not forget that the New Orleans Police Department has had to pay settlements because their police officers were shooting Black people to keep them from getting to safety. That future is already here.
And I just one other note, I remember when we were in New Orleans seeing Israeli security guards that had been flown by helicopter from Texas into New Orleans, and they deployed outside of a gated community. And when I interviewed them, they were from a company called ISI, Instinctive Shooting International, and they were there. Some of them were, veterans who had been in Lebanon, of the Israeli intelligence or armed forces, been in Lebanon, been in Palestine, and here they were with semi-automatic weapons deployed in defense of the rich in New Orleans.
We're joined now by two journalists who've just returned from New Orleans. On the line from Canada is writer and author Naomi Klein. Her piece in The Nation is called Purging the Poor. And we're joined in our studio by Democracy Now! Correspondent Jeremy Scahill.
I remember those days. We need to look really, really closely at these models, right? This is not about the future. This is about the present. If we want, and this is where the road we're on leads, right? So Rex Tillerson, now Secretary of State, when he was CEO of Exxon, after this company conducted their own climate change research in the 1970s, cutting edge climate change research, they were taking CO2 samples off of their oil tankers, publishing articles, their own scientists saying, yes, this is happening, yes, this is real, does this about turn in the 90s and pours money into climate change denial. Exxon knew all about climate change. They knew about it before Hansen testified on Capitol Hill in 1988 and said, yes, it's happening, humans are causing it. They knew all about it. They were already rejigging their operations, thinking about, and this has come out in the investigative reporting by Inside Climate News, by the LA Times, so now we know what they knew, when they knew it, or some of it, right? That they were looking at the opportunities that would come from melting Arctic ice and the ability to drill for oil. They were planning to raise their drilling rigs to compensate for sea level rise. They knew all about it, and yet they poured millions into very, very strong lobbying to keep the U.S. from signing the Kyoto Protocol. Full-page ads in the New York Times taken out by Mobil saying the science isn't clear. They knew the science was clear. Pouring money into climate change denial, spreading doubt. We lost decades because of this company. Finally, Rex Tillerson, I think it was in 2011, publicly says, yes, climate change is happening, but humans will adapt. Right? So if you can't grow food in one place, humans have always adapted. Now, how do humans adapt to not being able to grow food, Jeremy? They move. They seek safety. They do what humans do and have a human right to do. But we now are in this era of fortress continents fortressing themselves using these same private contractors. I mean, this is Eric Prince's new business, right? What's it called? Frontier Services?
Yeah, Frontier
something?
Services Group.
So he pitches himself to the European Union as the guy who's going to keep the boats from ever getting there. These privatized camps on islands, on Nauru, on Manus, where the Australian government intercepts ships, flies migrants fleeing war zones to these camps that are run by private contractors. By the way, this is what caused Donald Trump to hang up on the Prime Minister of Australia, because there was a deal made between Obama and Malcolm Turnbull, the Prime Minister of Australia, to take some of those refugees because the Australian government is so determined not to let them into their country. Rex Tillerson says humans adapt, but yet he's working for an administration that understands actually how humans are adapting is by turning people who dare to try to find safety into criminals.
Now, shifting to, I just wanted to briefly touch on the Clean Power Plan. This was the Obama administration initiative that began in the summer of 2014 that was aimed at reducing carbon pollution from power plants. And the Obama administration portrayed it as this very strong stance on climate change. So, and we know now that Trump is right now initiating the dismantling of that. So explain what the Clean Power Plan was under Obama, because you were very critical of Obama as well, and what this means that Trump is dismantling it.
So this was about getting off coal-powered energy. And so it would have shut down a lot of coal-powered refineries. And the reason why I was critical is that far too many of them were being replaced with natural gas from fracking, with all of the environmental risks associated with that. You know, we keep learning more and more about how much methane is being leaked, how much methane is produced in the fracking process, and also just in the burning itself. And one of the things that the Trump administration is doing, by the way, at the end of the Obama administration, they started to get serious about this and were requiring much better monitoring and reporting to find out how much methane was being released and leaked. And one of the first things that the Trump administration has done is said, oh, we don't want to know. Not only do we not want to know if climate change is happening, we don't want to know what you're polluting. So this is part of their don't ask, don't tell policy around climate change. It was not good enough, but it was important. It was important. It just wasn't enough. And this is why a lot of us thought, you know, that we were going to be having to push very hard under a Clinton presidency to try to get much more ambitious climate policies. But this is much worse to get rid of it, obviously. And I think it needs to be understood as part of a broader war on the poor and on people of color in the United States by the Trump administration. Because of the fact of environmental racism in the United States, it means that the communities that have had the dirtiest coal-powered fire plants are overwhelmingly communities of color, where you have very, very high rates of asthma and other respiratory illnesses, cancer clusters, because of the siting of these dirty industries in their backyards. The EPA under Scott Pruitt is completely eliminating the Environmental Justice Program, which was the program dealing with this very, very unequal siting of where the most pollution is happening and whose bodies are dealing with the impacts. So, you know, I think that this is both a climate disaster, it's also a human rights disaster because of the enormous health risks associated with coal, which is not to say natural gas is great, but coal is particularly noxious for human health.
I wanted to talk for a moment about Jared Kushner. This is Donald Trump's son-in-law, and by many accounts, the central figure, along with Steve Bannon, wandering the West Wing. And this is the guy that Trump has, the kid that Trump has put in charge of the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations.
I actually think he likes politics more than he likes real estate, I must tell you. And he's very good at politics. So,
but he recently created a new position for Jared Kushner, heading up what they're calling the White House Office of American Innovation, which is staffed entirely by former corporate executives, of course, from Goldman Sachs and General Motors and Microsoft, et cetera. They're calling them the SWAT team of strategic consultants. And of course, at the heart of this is deregulation. Your response to the role of Jared Kushner, but also the mission of this Office of American Innovation. I mean, it really is kind of a horribly, violently ironic name to be given to this department, worthy of Orwell.
It is, and also just kind of honest, right? Because this is a war on the public sphere. And now they have a SWAT team, and the SWAT team is going to be looking for more things to cut. You know, Bush announced, what am I going to do, Jeremy? I keep doing it. Trump announced, I believe it was his first day on the job, that there would be a 75% cut in regulation under his administration. So I think probably what they're going to be looking for is any way they can to cut regulations. And this is going to have huge implications for food safety, for water safety, and they're also looking for privatization opportunities.
Right. And recently, Jared Kushner sort of put a fine point on what you're saying when he told the Washington Post, quote, "The government should be run like a great American company. Our hope is that we can achieve successes and efficiencies for our customers, who are the citizens."
I mean, the really chilling part, of course, is what Donald Trump has done as a businessman, you know, how he has run his incredibly opaque company, the number of bankruptcies, the number of ripped off workers and contractors. I mean, he so consistently sacrifices his own investors, his own partners, and just looks out for number one. This has been the expansion of his business model internationally has been based on just leasing his name, right? I mean, this is what his sons are out doing. They're not building buildings themselves for the most part. They're selling the Trump name. One Trump development project in Panama, they got $50 million from in licensing and branding fees. So it's incredibly lucrative. But when there are problems, and there are very often problems with Trump developments, whether, if it's not on time, if people aren't able to, these are often revenue properties, if they feel that they've been lied to, whatever happens, and there have been several collapses, Trump is not responsible, right? The liabilities are held by these business partners to whom he's just leased his name. So if the U.S. government is run anything like the Trump organization, expect to be looted.
All right. On that very uplifting note, we'll end it there. Naomi Klein, who is the author of The Shock Doctrine, of This Changes Everything, and of No Logo, working on a forthcoming book, and now is a reporter, columnist, writer for The Intercept. Thanks a lot for joining us, Naomi.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great talking with you.